If you could ask Janis Joplin what her whole career was really about, she'd tell you it came down to one thing: needing to be loved. The girl who became rock's first queen made love to 25,000 people every night on stage, then walked back to empty hotel rooms alone. She died at 27 in one of those rooms, still haunted by the fear that nobody truly loved her. The next morning, a letter was waiting at the hotel from a man who did. She never opened it. This is about a woman who survived brutal rejection in small-town Texas, shattered every barrier in the male rock world, and became a legend, all while the lonely teenager from Port Arthur never stopped whispering that she wasn't good enough. Port Arthur, Texas in the 1950s wasn't built for girls like Janis Joplin. The oil town ran on conservative values, church on Sundays, and unspoken rules about how young women should behave. Janis gained weight as a teenager. Her skin broke out in acne. Boys at school started calling her names: pig, weirdo. Some threw pennies at her in the hallways, a casual cruelty that followed her between classes. She stopped trying to fit in with the pretty girls. There was no point. Instead, she wore men's shirts and tight skirts, cut her hair short, and befriended a small group of male outsiders who loved blues music and beat poetry. They'd slip away on weekends to rough roadhouse bars in nearby towns, sneaking into black churches to feel the raw power of gospel. Janis taught herself guitar. She sang folk songs at home. Music became the place where she felt connected to something larger than Port Arthur's judgment. But speaking up for what she believed made things worse. The town had an active Ku Klux Klan presence. When Janis argued for racial integration in class, when she defended beat culture and artists nobody in Port Arthur had heard of, her classmates turned on her harder. She became the girl who dared to be different in a place that punished difference. Years later, she'd sum it up with bitter clarity: "They laughed me out of class, out of town, and out of the state." The wound went deeper than teenage teasing. Port Arthur taught Janis a lesson she'd carry for life: that she was fundamentally unlovable, that something about her was wrong in ways she couldn't fix. She found refuge in the music of Bessie Smith and Odetta, in the ache and rawness of blues vocals that seemed to understand what it felt like to be cast out. The awkward Texas girl discovered she had a voice that could channel all that pain into something transcendent. Still, she was the outcast, the beatnik, the problem, and no amount of singing in her bedroom could change how Port Arthur saw her. Janis enrolled at the University of Texas at Austin in 1962, hoping college might be different. She went barefoot to class, strummed her auto harp on the quad, wore bohemian clothes that stood out among the sorority girls. The campus newspaper ran a profile calling her "She Dares to Be Different." For a moment, it seemed like maybe Austin would be kinder than Port Arthur. Then the fraternity boys got involved. As a prank, they put Janis's name into the campus Ugliest Man contest and plastered her face on posters around the university, tagging her as the joke candidate. The guys jeered at her appearance, laughed openly when she walked by, and treated the whole thing like sport. The cruelty was anything but subtle or private. Her humiliation played out publicly, reminding her yet again that she was someone to be mocked, not wanted. And it did. Friends recalled Janis breaking down in tears, devastated by the cruelty. This wasn't just Port Arthur all over again. It was worse, because she'd thought escaping her hometown would mean escaping the rejection. Instead, the message came through even louder. The world saw her as a joke, as someone unworthy of basic human dignity. So, in early 1963, at 20 years old, Janis abandoned her art studies and hitchhiked to San Francisco. She had nothing but her guitar, her voice, and a fierce determination to find somewhere she could belong. She later joked that she left Texas just to get away, that her head was in a completely different place than the people around her. But underneath the joke was the truth. Port Arthur and Austin had taught her she'd never be loved where she came from. California felt like the only option left. San Francisco's North Beach neighborhood in 1963 was a haven for beatniks, folk singers, and dropouts from straight society. Janis moved into the bohemian scene and immediately felt more at home than she ever had in Texas. She sang in coffee houses like the Coffee and Confusion, where her powerful, soulful voice stunned audiences into silence. People who heard her perform knew she had something extraordinary, a raspy intensity that seemed to come from some deep, ancient place. But San Francisco also offered easy access to drugs, and Janis embraced them without hesitation. The drug of choice in those early Haight-Ashbury days was methamphetamine. Janis and her new boyfriend started using meth heavily every day. She had a romantic notion about suffering, a belief that to truly sing the blues, you had to earn the right through pain and hardship. A friend later said Janis felt she had to pay her dues, that she hadn't suffered enough to be authentic. The drugs were proof she was living the life, paying the cost that real artists paid. Except the cost became unbearable. By 1965, Janis weighed around 88 pounds. She was skeletal, emaciated, her eyes hollow. She got arrested for shoplifting. The vibrant young singer who'd arrived in San Francisco 2 years earlier had become a shadow barely clinging to life. Her friends grew alarmed. They didn't ask permission. They collected money, bought her a bus ticket, and sent her back to Texas before the drugs killed her. Janis returned to Port Arthur, broken. Her parents were shocked by her condition. She agreed to get clean, to try living a normal life. For about a year, she actually did it. Swore off hard drugs, cut back on drinking, enrolled at Lamar University to study social work. She even got a conservative beehive hairdo and started seeing a psychiatric social worker. The girl who'd fled Texas as a wild rebel came back trying desperately to prove she could be normal. It didn't take. Normal felt like suffocation. In the fall of 1965, Janis got engaged to a man named Peter DeBlanc, a computer engineer she'd known in San Francisco. She wrote giddy letters to friends and family about wedding plans, about building a stable future. For a brief moment, it seemed like maybe she could have the conventional life Port Arthur had always wanted her to live: marriage, stability, respectability. Then Peter got cold feet and called off the engagement. The rejection hit Janis hard. It was another painful confirmation of what she'd always feared, that she wasn't really worthy of being loved. Around this time, she wrote a letter to her family that revealed more than she probably intended. She talked about how much people need to be loved, how much they need to be proud of themselves. Then she added, "And I guess that's what ambition really is." The confession explained everything. For Janis, fame had never centered on ego or money. It became a way to prove she mattered, to earn the love and validation that Port Arthur and Austin had denied her. Becoming a successful singer meant people would finally have to see her as valuable, as someone who deserved acceptance. So when an old friend from San Francisco, promoter Chet Helms, invited her to come sing for a struggling psychedelic rock band he managed, Janis packed her bags. She was done trying to be one of all the other women in Port Arthur, a fate she described with quiet dread. In mid-1966, she joined Big Brother and the holding company as lead singer. The match was electric. Big Brother played raw, trippy psychedelic rock, more about energy than polish. When Janis's hurricane-force vocals met their guitars, something explosive happened. The hippie crowds around the Bay Area couldn't believe what they were hearing. This raspy-voiced white girl who could wail like an old blues mama, who rocked with complete abandon. Then came June 1967 and the Monterey Pop Festival. Big Brother's performance of Ball and Chain became the moment that changed everything. Janis delivered gut-wrenching vocals that swung between vulnerable pleas and ferocious howls. Cass Elliot of the Mamas and the Papas sat in the audience with her mouth hanging open in awe. The festival introduced Janis Joplin to a national audience, and practically overnight, she became one of the hottest acts in rock. She was finally a star. The girl nobody wanted in Port Arthur was now being called the first queen of rock and roll. By 1968, Big Brother and the holding company's album Cheap Thrills shot to #1 on the charts. Songs like Piece of My Heart and Summertime showcased Janis's raw power, her ability to make every note feel like a piece of her soul tearing loose. The album went gold. Janis Joplin was a bona fide rock icon, a woman who commanded stages in ways women weren't supposed to. Crouching, screaming, stomping, shaking her wild hair, pouring every ounce of emotion into the microphone. She loved performing. She once said that on stage, she made love to 25,000 people. The rush of it, the connection, was better than any drug or any lover. But then she'd add the devastating second half of that statement. Then I go home alone. It wasn't a joke. It was the truth of her life. The applause proved she mattered, that she could move people, that she had value. But when the lights went down and the crowds dispersed, Janis went back to hotel rooms by herself. The fame that was supposed to fill the void from Port Arthur only seemed to deepen it. She was adored by thousands, but none of that translated into someone holding her at night, into the intimate human connection she'd craved since childhood. Her younger sister Laura would later observe that Janis was thin-skinned behind the armor of her rock star persona. The tough-talking, hard-drinking image was partly real. Janis did embrace the wild lifestyle, but it was also protection. People expected Janis Joplin to be a certain way, brash, sexual, unshakable. When she tried to show the lonely, insecure girl underneath, it didn't fit the image. So she kept playing the role, even though it isolated her. The rock world wasn't always welcoming to a woman who refused to play by feminine rules. The press could be vicious. One Rolling Stone writer called her an imperious whore, focusing on her unpolished looks and outrageous behavior rather than her artistry. Critics wrote hurtful comments about her weight, her skin, her appearance, echoes of the boys in Port Arthur who'd thrown pennies at her. Then there was the physical violence. During a confrontation with rockabilly singer Jerry Lee Lewis, Janis stood up to him. He responded by punching her in the face, snarling, "If you're gonna act like a man, I'll treat you like one." Janis laughed it off publicly, made it into an anecdote about surviving the rock scene, but it showed the cost of being a trailblazing woman in a male-dominated world. Sometimes the cost was literal. By the end of that year, tensions within Big Brother had grown too strong. The press singled Janis out as the star, called the rest of the band mediocre. She loved her bandmates, but she also wanted to grow artistically, and they couldn't keep pace with her fame. She left to go solo, forming the Cosmic Blues Band with a more R&B and soul-influenced sound. In August 1969, she performed at Woodstock, the biggest stage of all. But by then, she was struggling with heroin again. Those close to her noted she was intoxicated and high during her Woodstock set. The performance wasn't her finest, though her charisma still captivated the massive crowd. Her first solo album, I Got Dem Ol' Cosmic Blues Again, Mama, peaked at number 5, but the critical reception was mixed. Janis was at the height of her fame and simultaneously drowning in pressure, addiction, and loneliness. The girl who'd spent her life chasing love through applause was discovering that no amount of applause could actually provide it. By August 1970, Janis Joplin had formed a new band, the Full Tilt Boogie Band, and was working on what would become the Pearl album. The recording sessions were going brilliantly. She felt rejuvenated, excited about the music, and had even managed to stay off her old vice for several months. Friends noticed she seemed happier and healthier than she'd been in a long while. Then she decided to attend her 10-year high school reunion in Port Arthur. The decision itself revealed the complexity of what she felt about her hometown. Part of her wanted to rub her success in the faces of everyone who'd mocked her. She told a reporter she was there just to jam it up their asses, boasting about making $50,000 a night while her former classmates worked in gas stations. But beneath the bravado was a secret hope, one she barely admitted to herself. Maybe they'd finally accept her. Maybe being a famous rock star would earn their respect. She arrived in psychedelic glory, driving a Porsche she'd painted with hippie flowers, wearing a flamboyant feathered outfit and tinted glasses. She brought David Niehaus, a schoolteacher she'd met earlier that year during a trip to Brazil, as her date. David was different from the musicians and groupies in her usual orbit. He wasn't part of the rock scene at all. He'd been a Peace Corps worker on sabbatical when they met on Ipanema Beach during Carnival. He had no idea who Janis Joplin was when they first talked, which was part of his appeal. He loved the girl from Port Arthur, not the rock star. The reunion didn't go as Janis hoped. Many of her old classmates were unimpressed, even hostile. They gave her cold stares and snide remarks, as if no time had passed since high school. A local TV crew showed up to interview her. When the reporter asked how she differed from her old schoolmates, Janis deflected defensively. Then came the question about senior prom. "Did you go to your senior prom?" Janis's swagger faltered. Her eyes welled up. She admitted quietly, "No, I wasn't asked." Then she choked out, "I still haven't recovered." She tried to turn it into a joke. "It's enough to make you want to sing the blues." But the pain was visible. Even as a famous singer who'd performed for hundreds of thousands of people, she couldn't escape the hurt of being the girl nobody asked to prom. Her sister Laura later said that Janis's accomplishments didn't register with the Port Arthur crowd. All they saw was the same problem child, the same weirdo they'd rejected years ago. The reunion ended bittersweet. Janis got through it, but she left town with lingering sadness, the old wounds freshly reopened. Still, she threw herself back into finishing Pearl when she returned to Los Angeles in September. The sessions at Sunset Sound Recorders were going great. The band was tight, the vocals were powerful, and Janis was in high spirits. After long days in the studio, they'd unwind at a favorite bar called Barney's Beanery, drinking and laughing about the day's work. The future felt full of possibility. A new album, maybe a deeper relationship with David, new music projects on the horizon. For once, things seemed to be looking up. On Saturday, October 3, 1970, Janis spent the day at the studio listening back to tracks for what would become Pearl and getting ready to record another vocal the next afternoon. That night, she and the Full Tilt Boogie Band hit Barney's Beanery as usual. She had a couple of vodka orange juice cocktails, nothing excessive. She was in a good mood, talking about plans for after the album's release. But when she returned to the Landmark Motor Hotel in Hollywood, where she was staying during the recording sessions, she found herself alone. Her boyfriend, Seth Morgan, was supposed to come by that night, but never showed. The friend she sometimes spent time with didn't show up either. For the first time in a while, Janis was truly by herself. No band, no lover, no companion. Earlier that year, she'd managed to stay off the things she'd fought so hard to quit. And during the Pearl sessions, she'd tried to keep herself in check by relying more on structure and work than on drugs. But she'd also slipped back into using small, managed doses, telling herself she had it under control. That night, in the vulnerability of unexpected loneliness, she sought comfort in her old vice. She decided to shoot up. The substance she turned to that night was far stronger than what she'd encountered before, part of an unusually powerful batch that caused several overdoses in Los Angeles that same weekend. With her tolerance lowered from time away from heavy use, the dose hit her much harder than she expected. The combination of this exceptionally strong dose and a body no longer used to it proved lethal. Sometime in the early hours of October 4th, Janis Joplin collapsed beside her bed, a cigarette still in her hand. The next day, when she didn't show up at the recording studio, her road manager, John Cook, sensed something was wrong. He rushed to the hotel and found the door to her room oddly ajar. Inside, he discovered Janis's lifeless body wedged between the bed and the nightstand. She was 27 years old. The news sent shockwaves through the music world. It was only 2 weeks after Jimi Hendrix had also died at 27, adding to the eerie sense that an entire generation's heroes were falling to their demons. But for those who knew Janis intimately, the tragedy went deeper than the statistics of the 27 Club. A letter for Janis from David Nyhouse was still waiting at the hotel, unopened. He'd been traveling and had written to say he missed her, that he wanted to reunite. The man who'd loved her for who she really was, not the rock star, but the girl from Port Arthur, had reached out at a moment when she desperately needed to hear it. She never got to read his words. Janis died believing that love had eluded her once again, that she was fundamentally unlovable, that the loneliness of her teenage years had followed her all the way to fame and would never let her go. What she didn't know was that someone actually did love her deeply, that acceptance was within reach. Biographer Holly George Warren would later reflect on the heartbreaking timing. What's really tragic is that there was one guy in her life who really loved her. She didn't realize it. If Janis had opened that letter before that lonely night, would it have changed anything? Would knowing she was loved have been enough to keep her from reaching for the drug that killed her? The question haunts everyone who studies her life. The album Pearl was released in early 1971, a few months after Janis's death. It became the biggest-selling album of her career. Me and Bobby McGee, the Chris Christopherson song Janis had recorded with such aching tenderness, reached #1 on the charts. Millions of people mourned a voice they'd never hear live again, a presence that had burned so bright and so briefly. Janis joined the ranks of the so-called 27 Club, that grim roster of musicians who died at 27, Brian Jones, Jimi Hendrix, and soon after, Jim Morrison. The media fixated on the tragic pattern, the idea that rock stardom was a curse that consumed its brightest talents. But remembering Janis Joplin only for how she died misses the point of who she was. In just a few short years, she'd kicked down doors for every woman who came after her in rock music. She proved a woman could be the raw, hard-living lead singer of a blues rock band and command the same respect as any male frontman. She showed that expressing rage, desire, heartbreak, and vulnerability on stage wasn't just acceptable, it could make for legendary art. Her influence echoes through every powerful female rock and blues singer who followed: Stevie Nicks, Melissa Etheridge, Amy Winehouse. Janis showed them it was possible. Holly George Warren notes that she really was the first woman to be such a gigantic rock star, and she did it entirely on her own terms. Those who knew her reject the narrative that she was simply a victim destroyed by the rock lifestyle. They remember her as whip-smart, funny, and fearless in pursuit of her dreams. George Warren insists that while people still see Joplin as a victim, that view doesn't capture the whole truth. She was a fearless woman who took the bull by the horns. She knew the risks. She wanted to be a major rock star, and she did exactly what she wanted to do. Janis lived authentically, intensely, refusing to compromise who she was, even when it cost her. She once said she was just going to keep rocking, to have a party while she was on this earth, because she didn't know where she'd be 20 years from now. That philosophy was reckless, maybe even self-destructive, but it also gave us the unforgettable Janis we remember. The tragedy isn't that she died young. The tragedy is that she spent her life convinced she was unlovable when the opposite was true. She was loved by millions of fans who felt her pain and passion in every note she sang, by friends and family who tried to save her, by fellow musicians who admired her courage and heart, and by David Niehaus, who saw past the rock star persona to the vulnerable girl underneath. Her own words, written in that letter to her family, serve as the most fitting epitaph. Ambition is really just the need to be loved and to be proud of yourself. Janis's entire career was driven by that need, by the hope that if she sang loud enough, raw enough, powerfully enough, she could finally prove she was worthy. She was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 1995. She received a Grammy Lifetime Achievement Award. Documentaries, biographies, and tribute concerts continue to revisit her story, often emphasizing the duality she herself articulated, the lonely little girl hidden behind the rock rebel. Janis once said that being intellectual creates a lot of questions and no answers, that you can fill your life with ideas and still go home lonely. What really matters, she insisted, are feelings. That's what music was to her, a way to take the sorrow, love, rage, and yearning that consumed her and turn them into something that could touch other people. The love she spent her life chasing was already there, in every person whose life she touched with her voice. She just ran out of time before she could see it.